Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in again to our Revelation series. Today, I'm going to be looking at Revelation 21, verse 1, all the way through chapter 22, verse 5. And I'll be reading through the English Standard Version. So go ahead and do that. Have that available to you. As you saw in the last video segment, I'm doing this because doing this here in my office to catch us up a little bit. There were a couple of weeks where our sermons weren't recorded in our main assembly in church because my video guy, he and his family had to quarantine themselves. But we got good news today that everybody in the home is negative for COVID-19, so they're going to be returning. And the next video segment you'll see will be like usual in our main church assembly. And it'll be much higher quality because I won't be doing it. I do want to thank my son Gideon again, who is our video guy today. You'll see his thumb. That's about all he has to show. Okay, so Revelation 21. What will eternity be like? What will heaven be like? How can we possibly describe it? How can we get our minds around what eternity is, what heaven will be like? It's impossible. It reminds me of my daughter Evangeline sometimes when she tries to think about what the never-ending presence of God would be like. Always being there, never ending. It like hurts her mind, she'll tell me. It's a little bit like the prophet Ezekiel when he is describing what he sees in Ezekiel chapter 1. He sees the throne of God and its magnificence and everything that it can move wherever it wants. He tries to describe what he sees about God's presence on the throne. At chapter 1, verse 28, he says, after describing all this, he says, "Such was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. And when I saw it, I fell on my face." So Ezekiel says, this is the best that I can do. And even as I've written this down here, this is kind of the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. He didn't say, this is what the Lord looks like. He did his very best to describe it, and he still says, my words probably fall short. John in the book of Revelation has been doing his best with this book we've been studying as well. He's been doing his best to describe what he sees. There's lots of images, lots of symbols, even numbers are often symbolic in the book, but often words fail us, like trying to describe how cute a baby girl is. You say, oh, she's so cute, she's just, how do you describe how cute she is? Words fail us. Or how awful an accident is when you come up on it on the freeway and all the cars are slowing down, and as they go, finally you get to it and you look and you can't believe how munched up this car is or whatever, and you try to describe it with words, but you can't very well. John is going to describe to us what the end of time is going to be like in the last two chapters of the book here. And so it's difficult to do that, though. And finally, with all the evil gone in the world and nothing but eternity ahead for those who've been marked by the Lamb, what will that be like? So let's read together Revelation 21, verse 1 through chapter 22, verse 5. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people. And God himself will be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain any more, for the former things have passed away." And he who is seated on the throne said, "Behold, I am making all things new." Also he said, "Write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true." And he said to me, "It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I will give from the spring of the water of life without payment. The one who conquers will have this heritage, and I will be his God, and he will be my son. But as for the cowardly, the faithless, the detestable, as for murderers, the sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars, their portion will be in the lake that burns with fire and sulfur, which is the second death." Then came one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls full of the seven last plagues and spoke to me, saying, "Come, I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb." And he carried me away in the Spirit to a great high mountain, and showed me the holy city Jerusalem coming down out of heaven from God, having the glory of God, its radiance like a most rare jewel, like a jasper, clear as crystal. It had a great high wall with 12 gates, and at the gates 12 angels, and on the gates the names of the 12 tribes of the sons of Israel were inscribed. On the east 3 gates, on the north 3 gates, on the south 3 gates, and on the west 3 gates. And the wall of the city had 12 foundations, and on them were the 12 names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. And the one who spoke with me had a measuring rod of gold to measure the city and its gates and walls. The city lies 4 square, its length the same as its width. And he measured the city with his rod, 12,000 stadia. Its length and width and height are equal. He also measured its wall, 144 cubits by human measurement, which is also an angel's measurement. The wall was built of jasper, while the city was pure gold, like clear glass. The foundations of the wall of the city were adorned with every kind of jewel. The first was jasper, the second sapphire, the third agate, the fourth emerald, the fifth onyx, the sixth carnelian, the seventh chrysolite, the 8th beryl, the 9th topaz, the 10th chrysoprase, the 11th jacinth, and the 12th amethyst. And the 12 gates were 12 pearls, each of the gates made of a single pearl, and the street of the city was pure gold, like transparent glass. And I saw no temple in the city, for its temple is the Lord God the Almighty and the Lamb. And the city has no need of sun or moon to shine on it, for the glory of God gives its light, and its lamp is the Lamb. By its light will the nations walk, and the kings of the earth will bring their glory into it, and its gates will never be shut by day. There will be no night there. They will bring into it the glory and the honor of the nations, but nothing unclean will ever enter it, nor anyone who does what is detestable or false, but only those who are written in the Lamb's book of life. Then the angel showed me the river of the water of life, bright as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb through the middle of the street of the city. Also on either side of the river, the tree of life with its 12 kinds of fruit, yielding its fruit each month. The leaves of the tree, I knew this was going to happen, were for the healing of the nations. No longer will there be anything accursed, but the throne of God and of the Lamb will be in it, and his servants will worship him. They will see his face, and his name will be on their foreheads, and night will be no more. They will need no light of lamp or sun, for the Lord God will be their light, and they will reign forever and ever. This is the word of the Lord from Revelation 21, and also the first 5 verses of chapter 22. So, a couple of chapters ago, we looked at the betrothal or the engagement of the Lamb with his bride, the church. Now we get to see the wedding of the Lamb and the bride. Chapter 19, verses 7 through 8 says, "Let us rejoice and exult and give him the glory, for the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his bride has made herself ready. It was granted her to clothe herself with fine linen, bright and pure, for the fine linen is the righteous deeds of the saints." And then verse 9, "Blessed are those who are invited to the marriage supper of the Lamb." So back then we saw the bridegroom also dressed in white. He was looking magnificent on his white horse, and his groomsmen, army, all in white, they were behind him. When we get to chapter 21 here, the betrothal period is over, and it's time for the wedding celebration. Chapter 21, verse 2, I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. So with the wedding of the Lamb and his bride, there's no more waiting, no more separation. Verse 3, behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them as their God. They will live together, very literally, happily ever after. How many times have we heard that or read that at the end of a fairy tale story or a Disney story? This is true, though, that the Lamb, the bridegroom, and the church, throughout time, his bride, when they come together finally, it will be happily ever after, without end. Chapter 21, verse 4 says, he will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Death shall be no more, neither shall there be mourning or crying nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away. Well, as I read this, I'm mindful of my own wedding day. Those of you that are watching, if you're married, perhaps you can think back to yours as well. And when Elise and I got married, I didn't see her the morning of the wedding. Some people forgo that tradition, but we kept with it. I didn't see her until I was standing up at the front of the auditorium of the Boise Church of Christ, and I looked at the back, and after all of the groomsmen and the bridesmaids and everybody was finally in place, and everybody stood up because I could see Papa Kevin, my father-in-law, escorting Elise from the back to the front. And I saw her there dressed in white, looking as beautiful as ever. And she came up and we made our wedding vows. And after photographs and the reception that took way too long, in my opinion, were finally over with, we escaped in a white convertible Sebring that I had rented, and we began our lives together. Our identities changed that day. Elise took my name. She moved into my home. We didn't have to say goodbye to each other at the end of the night, which we had been used to doing for at least a year. The first couple of nights there that we were there together, it was like, is this okay? Shouldn't you be going back to your apartment? Everything was fine. Everything had changed. And I don't think we were apart from each other for quite a while after we had finally gotten married. It's the same with the bride of Christ. Verse 5 says, behold, I am making all things new. The old ways are done and gone when the bridegroom and the bride finally come together. In verse 6 it says, the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and end, has ransomed his bride. He will give his bride living water. He will be with his bride for a never-ending heritage. His bride will take a new name too, just like Elise took my name. The church will take a new name, New Jerusalem, a change of identity here. And so an angel comes and tells John, come, I'm going to show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb. And so this is probably the same angel that we saw back in chapter 17, that angel that came to John and said, come, I will show you the great prostitute, Babylon. And John here is taken in chapter 21 to a high mountain where he can have a good view of this wedding ceremony, the best seat in the house from this high mountain. I don't know what high mountain it was. It could be Mount Hermon, which is kind of in the northern part of Israel, about elevation 9,300 feet, that can see the New Jerusalem really well. I don't know. But in chapter 19, the bride was dressed in pure white linen. That was the righteous deeds of the saints there. But what is she wearing here? Now, this is where interpreting the passage becomes a little bit more complicated. Are we talking about heaven here that we see? Or are we talking about the church seen throughout time? The people of God, Israel, and the new Israel, the church. Are we talking about, which one of those are we talking about here? I think it's somehow both. Remember, symbolism and allegory that we see here in this apocalyptic type of literature isn't always easy to define like that. Remember that John is describing to us the best that he can with quill and parchment what he sees. And sometimes the written word can't really describe in perfection what he sees here. But here's the description as he has laid it out. We see New Jerusalem, the bride of Christ, radiant, like a most rare jewel, it says in verse 11. We see high walls, and these walls are made of jasper. They are 144 cubits. That's how he measures. We're assuming that's thickness here because later we see a different measurement for how tall the walls are. So 144 cubits thick. And if you don't have your cubit stick with you, that's 216 feet thick. It is built on 12 foundations. You know that for a home to be steady, for a home to be firm and not collapse, it needs a good foundation that it's built upon. Well, here, the bride of Christ, the New Jerusalem, has 12 foundations. I don't know what that looks like, if they're stacked one on top of another. And on those foundations are the 12 names of the 12 apostles. I don't know if each one of those guys, John had written his name in the foundation, like people do in sidewalks. And then Peter goes over there and actually does accidentally on the same one. John's like, that's mine. This is your foundation. I don't know what that looked like, but you see the 12 names of the 12 apostles on these 12 foundations that the New Jerusalem is built upon. And the foundations also have every kind of jewel in them. Jasper, sapphire, agate, emerald, onyx, carnelian, chrysolite, beryl, topaz, chrysoprase, jacinth, and amethyst. I don't even know what all of those look like, but we know that they're rare and beautiful jewels. And on those walls, there are 12 gates. It's very symmetrical here. We have 3 gates at each wall, and there's 4 walls, so there's 12 gates all together. And each of those 12 gates have the 12 tribes of Israel named on them. So we see both at the gates, Old Israel, and we see at the foundations, New Israel, with the apostles' names and the tribes of Israel, their names. So they're combined here. We see 12 angels at the gates, and I don't know what that looks like. I mean, are those guys like guards for the gates? They only let certain people. I don't know what that looks like. And at this point, all of evil is destroyed. So everyone is welcome in that's coming. Maybe these are more like greeters, like a glorified Walmart greeter here, the Michael the Archangel. Hey, welcome, come on in, shaking hands and all that kind of thing. And those gates are described as single pearls. That's where we get this phrase of the pearly gates. How beautiful would that be? Then the angel measures the city. The length and the width and the height are all equal. And that equal measurement is 12,000 stadia. Now again, if you don't have your stadia stick handy, that equals 1,380 miles. So the city is 1,380 miles wide, 1,380 miles long, 1,380 miles high. Why is he measuring it? Well, just like we've seen before that God measures the people of God, it's his way to say that the city is stable and firm. There is nothing that gets beyond the vision of God. He knows every inch of it, and every part of it is under his control and protection. The city and the streets are pure gold, like clear glass. Now again, I look through clear glass, and that's not the same as pure gold to me, because pure gold looks opaque to me. But here again, words kind of fail, but we're supposed to see gold here that has literally no impurities in it whatsoever. Are we to take all of this literally? I don't think we'd be wrong if we did, but however, just like Ezekiel before him, I think John is saying, I'm doing the best I can to describe what I see, the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. And as beautiful as this description is, it pales in comparison to what we see in verses 22 through 27. There is no temple in this city. Jerusalem before, the old Jerusalem, had a temple. And that temple represents the Lord's presence. His name is there. And so when the temple is there, we know that the Lord is there among his people. That's why the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem by the Babylonians in 587 BC was so devastating to Israel. The temple amongst them meant God is with us. So two ways to look at that terrible destruction in 587 BC. First of all, if the temple's destroyed, that means God's presence isn't with us anymore. And then those that were taken away into exile were taken away from where the temple was. Again, God's not with us because the temple of the Lord is not among us. God's presence isn't there. But verse 22 says, for its temple is the Lord God the Almighty and the Lamb. Now think about the tabernacle and the temple in the Old Testament. If we think about that tabernacle, that temple, and the way it was measured, we now know why the New Jerusalem here is shaped as a giant cube, 1,380 feet long, 1,380 feet wide, 1,380 feet high. That seems kind of a strange way to measure a city. It's like a giant cube. But in the Old Testament, the tabernacle and the temple had a holy place where the priests were allowed in, and then the most holy place, or the Holy of Holies. And that's where God's name, God's presence, his glory would enter in on the Day of Atonement. And only the high priest could go in only that one day out of the year, and only when he made all of the proper sacrifices. So the dimensions of the Holy of Holies, or the most holy place in the temple, was 20 cubits by 20 cubits by 20 cubits. It was a perfect cube, just like New Jerusalem is measured as a perfect cube. So when you see New Jerusalem here measured in that way, it's essentially a gigantic Holy of Holies, a gigantic most holy place, because God is there dwelling with his people. There's no need for a temple in that city because God is in all of it, and his people are there with him. We also see this description in verse 23 that there's no sun or moon there. The glory of God gives the light, and the Lamb is like the lamp. And by that light, all the nations of the world will know how to walk, where to walk, as they enter in through the giant pearly gates that will never shut. There is no night there either. And there's no unclean, detestable, or false thing that will enter in, because all of that has faded away. And only those whose names are written in the Lamb's book of life are there, as we saw in the previous chapter. What we're talking about here is God's redemption of his creation. Remember that redemption is a word that's connected with setting a slave free. A slave belongs to a particular master, and then when a new master comes and buys that slave and sets that slave free, that's redemption. That slave has been redeemed, has been bought and set free. And so those who have repented and confessed Jesus as Lord are redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. But God is also interested in redeeming the rest of his creation too. We're not just talking about people, we're talking about all that he has created. Our culture today is largely a throwaway culture. If I don't like a particular item in clothing, I throw it away. If I don't like, my old television, I throw it away. If I don't like various things that I have, I throw it away. If I don't like a friendship or relationship, I throw it away. But God does not believe in all of that. And as much as it pains me to say, God believes in recycling. He really does. Just as God will remake our mortal bodies, he will do the same with his creation as well. Romans 8, verses 19 through 22 says, "For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the sons of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation's been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now." That's why everything around us seems to slowly decay and fall apart. Why we have to make repairs on our home. Why we need to make repairs on our tractor and on our cars. And why we have to make repair and maintain relationships. Everything in creation, this side of heaven, because of sin, is decaying. And all of it is longing and groaning to be reborn, to be remade, to be redeemed. I think it's significant that the Bible begins and ends with the same theme: created mankind in the garden. Think back to Genesis chapters 1 and 2. We see all created creatures. We see Adam and Eve in perfect harmony with each other, in perfect harmony with all of creation, in perfect harmony in their relationship with God. A river flows out of Eden and is divided up into 4 others. They could eat from the tree of life as much as they wanted. And we see that same stuff in Revelation chapter 22, verses 1 through 5. The river of the water of life is there. The tree of life, but it's upgraded. This time it has 12 kinds of fruit. And the leaves bring healing of the nations. I mean, even eating the leaves brings healing. And the 12 kinds of fruit are available at all times, not just in late summer and early fall, like we know of things, but that 12 kinds of fruit, it could be that it's available at all times for people. And it all brings healing. It all brings life. No longer is there going to be anything accursed. That calls us back to Genesis chapter 3. After Adam and Eve listened to the serpent, that dragon, Satan, after they listened to him and they turn away from God and rebelliously choose their own ways instead of him, they essentially make themselves idols. After that, everything is cursed. Everything starts to come apart. The relationship between Adam and Eve is strained. The relationship between man and created things, animals, and the ground is cursed. The relationship between man and God is cursed. Eve will give birth now with greatly increased childbearing pains. Adam is not going to be able to do his work easily anymore. He's going to be doing hard toil because the ground is cursed and thorns and that stuff will come forth. So we see in Genesis 3 a curse that comes because of sin, but we see here in the New Jerusalem in chapter 22, nothing there will be accursed. And they will see his face. Everybody there will see God's face. Remember, Adam and Eve hide from God's face when they sin, but here in the New Jerusalem, we'll see God's face as friends see each other face to face. And what was the very first thing that God created? He says in chapter 1, verse 3 of Genesis, "Let there be light." And there was light. Did you ever notice that light comes before God created the sun, the moon, and the stars? That didn't happen until the 4th day. So now we see that, light comes from God, not actually from the sun and the moon. So God's not interested in throwing away all of his creation and starting over. He had plenty of opportunities to do that throughout history, but he never did. Destroy everything in a worldwide flood? Yes, but no. He worked through Noah and his family. Destroy everything after the Tower of Babel? No, he started working through Abram and his family. Destroy all of Israel and start over? No, he worked through Moses and made a covenant with the people of Israel. Destroy all of mankind for continual evil, oppression, and idolatry. No, God works through one man, Jesus, to redeem all of humanity. So God is in the redemption business, not the destruction business. Not the removal or destruction of everything, only what is evil and temporary will be removed and destroyed. Samwise Gamgee, talking to Gandalf in The Lord of the Rings, says, "Is everything sad going to come untrue when all of the forces of evil are destroyed?" These are his words to Gandalf. And I see the same thing happening here at the end of the book of Revelation. This is probably what J.R.R. Tolkien had in mind when he wrote those words of Sam. Everything sad is going to come untrue at the end of time. No more tears, no more death, no more mourning, no more crying, no more pain. The former things have passed away. No more cowardly, no more faithless, no more detestable things, no more murderers or sexually immoral or sorcerers or idolaters or liars. No more need for sun or moon because God is the light. No more racism and division between nations because they all come in. The gates are open wide. No night there. And if you like nighttime, it's like a time of rest and peace like I do. I long to get to the end of the night sometimes so that I can finally hit the hay. But think about like a child. A child never wants to go to bed. You do everything you can to get them into bed. And then once they get there, you do everything you can to get them to stay in bed because they want to stay up. They don't want to go into the darkness separated from their loving family. Maybe that's what we should have in mind. No night there. We don't have to be separated from each other and from God. There's nothing unclean there, nothing detestable, nothing false, nothing accursed will be there. And it's interesting, in verse 1, John says there's no more sea. Why no more sea? Because personally, I like to see the seas, the oceans, lakes. When I go north to McCall, I love seeing Payette Lake there. It's gorgeous, it's beautiful. No more sea? Well, maybe think about John. Where is he as he is penning this book that we have? Where is he? He's in exile on the Isle of Patmos. What separates him from the people that he loves, that he's writing to? The sea separates him. So maybe that's what he has in mind when he says, no more sea, no more separation anymore from between God and people. No more. Verse 5 of chapter 21, we hear God saying, "Behold, I am making all things new." How we need to be reminded of this passage today when we've gone through almost a whole year of things seeming to be falling apart, of all the cancellations of things. No leadership training for Christ this year. No graduation parties. People have had funerals where they've been separated from one another, where they would love to be embraced. We've been separated. No preteen camp or teen camp at Camp Ivydale this year. On and on the list goes of things that were canceled that didn't happen. We've seen lots of violence this year. We've seen lots of anger this year. Politics have been sickening this year of how polarized our country has become. We need to hear, "Behold, I am making all things new." We won't see this stuff forever. There will be a day when all of that stuff that has hurt us physically and emotionally this year will be gone. All things will be made new. We need to be reminded today, someday that will be the fate for all of us, the destination for all of us. We will see God face to face, and he will wipe away every tear from our eyes. He makes all things new. Trust him, who makes everything good and new again. Thank you for taking some time today to be with me as we look at Revelation 21, the first part of chapter 22. Next, we'll see the end of this book. And I give you thanks for the time we've spent together.